The following is a conversation with Taisha Fabricius. Well, actually, we should start with Taisha's two cats, Missy and Austin. As you'll hear quite late in this episode, Taisha would have expected me to bring them up right at the beginning of the episode. Well, but as it's impossible to rewind time, the only thing I can do now to save my honor is to mention them right here in the intro. So this is an official shout out to Missy and Austin. Now, Taisha is a technology leader at Esri and the product manager for the famous procedural modeling tool called CityEngine. As some of you in the audience may know, I was working in that same development team working on CityEngine too. This was just a bit earlier than Taisha started. Since that time, we've been in regular contact for all sorts of international conference presentations, technical software aspects, showcase stories, and of course also regarding the CityEngine user meeting that I've been organizing since 2017. In all the years I've been in contact with Taisha, I saw her switch roles multiple times. And it almost felt effortless from the outside how she is capable of learning new skills, growing into new responsibilities, and still constantly operate with laser-sharp precision and persistence. She is a true powerhouse. Taisha is a truly inspiring person, and I am sure that after having listened to this episode, you will agree. Stay humble, stay curious. This is the 3D Environment Podcast. And now, please enjoy the conversation with Taisha Fabricius. Sweet! Alrighty, let's get started with episode 7. It is an honor to have you on board, Taisha.
Thanks a lot for having me, Matt. This is super cool and a much more professional setup than I expected. So this is awesome.
Yeah, no, if I'm doing certain things, I'm trying to do them right.
Yeah, that's very obvious.
All right, very cool. So yeah, let's just get started. And please give us a short little intro who you are and where you came from.
Yeah, okay, a short one. So yes, you introduced me. I'm Taisha. I work for a company called Esri out of Zurich, where Esri has an R&D center. And yeah, my role here is in product management for a software called CityEngine, which we will for sure discuss in more detail throughout this podcast. And where I've come from, sort of, I guess we'll get into this a little bit too in the next few questions. But came from Australia, live obviously here in Switzerland now, and have a background in geomatic engineering.
Nice. Yeah, but let's actually dig deeper a little bit. So what... You said you're originally, and I think everybody can hear it, originally you're from Australia. And what motivated you to move and come to Switzerland?
Yeah, so again, short version of it. After university, I thought to myself, hey, a couple of years of international work experience probably wouldn't be the worst thing ever. And through my dad is half Swiss, obviously makes me a quarter Swiss. So we had the passport. So I figured, let's go. And 1 to 2 years turned into 12. So, and I don't see myself leaving anytime soon.
Nice. So it's been quite some time that you've been here.
It has,
in Switzerland. Very cool. So now you mentioned geomatic engineering, which is a mouthful.
It is.
Which is a very, very technical background, and so geomatics and GIS. Can you give us, for those that don't know specifically what it is, can you give us an overview of what those things are and how, for example, the education is structured?
Sure. I mean, I can give you an overview of what it was like at my time when I was studying this, because I feel like nowadays the whole course looks very different because of the way that technology is advanced and the things that are happening in this space. So when I was studying, and I won't say when exactly that was, but back in the day when I was studying, geomatic engineering, at least in Australia and in Melbourne where I studied, was sort of still a relatively new course of studies. Like, it hadn't existed for very long, and it was kind of a merge between surveying, so land surveying, and then informatics, right? So I always try and explain it like geo, earth, surveying, and matics, informatics. And so those two things, have come together and formed this geomatics or geomatic, or depending on where you are, it's pronounced differently, degree. So that was my undergrad was, in geomatic engineering at the Melbourne University.
Ah, cool. And what motivated you personally to go into this direction, if I may ask?
Yeah, you can, because it's just such a... So my theory is nobody plans to do this course of studies. I feel like most of the people that I know kind of like fell into it or made their way into it somehow. Nobody as a kid grew up thinking, I cannot wait to study geomatic engineering. And so for me, it was very much so. I was studying and finishing a different degree at the time. I studied criminology. And throughout that degree, it became abundantly clear to me that I don't have the capability to shut off my emotional side and my empathetic side when it came to my work at that point. So I needed to choose something else that didn't require as much of me in that aspect. And so I was flicking through the handbook and I stumbled across this degree that I had no idea what it was. It sounded cool. As you said, it's a mouthful. So I was like, oh yeah, it sounds like, it's something smart. But then I was looking and reading through the boxes of, what the course required. And I was ticking all these boxes like, do you like being outside? Do you like computers? Do you like this, that, and the other? And that sort of made me then go into that. So it was complete fluke. It could have been anything.
Nice. Yeah, for me it was actually very similar. So I didn't know what I should study.
Yeah.
And there were some tendencies, and I literally kind of went through the book and with the list also.
Yeah.
Should I study this? No. This? No. This? No. And in the end, there was just physics and architecture. And I said, well, I'm not smart enough for physics. So, well, it's going to be architecture. All right. But then you continued with the education, and you finished an MBA, which is also not kind of typical in the combination with let's say engineering degrees. But I guess from your explanation, there's a tendency of, let's say, multiple things that you're interested in, and so I assume that's just another one of those directions.
Yeah, so I mean, it took me, after finishing my 2 degrees, it definitely took me a while to even want to study again, I guess, after that. It was 6 years with undergraduate studies, with everything combined. And so then I started my MBA sort of part-time while I was working. So that's the cool thing, I guess, about these courses that you can do later on, is that you are able to combine them with your work. Obviously, if you have good working conditions, that makes it a little bit easier. And so, for me, it was always, as you said, like, I like so many different things, and I feel like I have strength in different areas that I didn't want to be focusing solely on one thing. And what I was realizing for myself is I really like sort of the more strategic aspects of things, the more, I guess like forward thinking things. And in order to, at least this is what I thought, I've now learned that's not necessarily the case. But at the time I was like, well, if I want to be taken seriously as somebody who wants to progress in this area, then I need to have something that is, some sort of accreditation. And so I ended up choosing there's obviously different types of MBAs, but I ended up choosing an MBA that was a collaboration between this sort of technical university, one of the best technical universities in Germany called RWTH Aachen, and also one of the best business schools in the world, which was the Hochschule St. Gallen, right, HSG. And those two universities together then created this technology and innovation MBA. And so that played fully then into my area of interest and was really prepping me for, I guess, work in the tech field.
I'm curious, for both of those educations, what was the most important lesson which you took away?
You mean from both geomatics and my MBA?
Yeah.
The most important one, I guess, one of the things for me is like, I feel like it's really hard to plan your life. And so for me personally, the most important one was, stuff happens and life happens, and you might have thought, or you might have seen yourself go in a certain direction, or, very much focused on, I must study whatever it is, right, to be successful in some way or another. But there are so many different ways to be successful. Like there isn't this one path that tells you that this is how it should be. So that for me was the biggest lesson.
Expensive lessons.
An expensive, and also, wait, hold on. I'd also like to add that I don't regret. Choosing the path that I chose, but I think I could have, saved myself some grey hair by maybe not trying to do my MBA and work full time and all of those things. Yeah. Like I could have gotten to where I am or where I want to go differently as well. But I mean, for sure, I'm happy I did it. Also, just for the fact to say that I did it and it was hard and not, certainly not a walk in the park, but I finished it and I did well. So that's enough for me too.
Yeah. No, and there's no manual for life, right? The most important lessons you have to learn yourself.
Yeah.
And things that aren't hard are almost not worth achieving, right?
100%. Yeah.
Interesting.
I wonder if everyone thinks that way though.
Like, I don't think so.
I don't know. I feel like there's sort of this I don't know, like this masochistic tendency somehow to be like, if it's not hard, it's not worth it. Like I don't know if that's a mindset that everybody shares.
Not necessarily. I didn't, maybe I said it wrong. I don't think if it's not hard, it's not worth that you have achieved a certain goal, but it's more in the sense of things that are hard in general. By going through a process of, let's say, hardship, the appreciation afterwards for the process is much, much higher.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, 100%.
It's like the bicycle that is given to you as a present you perceive it as less valuable than having worked for it through holidays and so on to actually buy it yourself.
Right. Yeah. Right. No, I fully agree with that. Yes.
All right. So now after these educations, just for the people that get a little bit what your background is and what this actually implies in the business world, you have then worked, you mentioned it already previously, in multiple engineering companies, including the famous company Leica. Mm-hmm. Now, how was the experience there and what things did you work on? Yeah.
So I worked for Leica Geosystems. A lot of people think Leica, they think cameras. I didn't work for the camera Leica, but for the company that creates surveying equipment, right? So that was my first. So maybe just a quick step back. Prior to that, I was working in construction. Like I was working as a surveyor in construction for construction companies, both here in Switzerland and in Australia, obviously working with this Leica equipment every day. Mm-hmm. Then, I realized I would rather, not have to be out in the field every day, but I would rather work on the technology that I'm using every day. And that's how I got to Leica. And at the time, it was just a wonderful coincidences, a course of events that they were launching a series of surveying equipment for the construction professional. So not for the surveyor, but for the construction worker. Mm-hmm. And they wanted somebody on their team who was working in construction that had that sort of background. And that's how I came to my job at the time. And for me, that was my first sort of, entry point into, I'm going to say like the software world. Right? Mm-hmm. Because I did choose, I studied some aspects of that at university, but I did choose the, working more with the hardware and working more in the field, that as my path originally. And then, coming over to Leica and working on the software and on the, I guess, the concepts, the usability of these surveying instruments. And that was very, very cool for me because I learned so much, and we had such a fun team, and it was such a fun time in my life. So yeah, I think back very fondly to my time at Leica.
I wanted to actually ask, because you said there's hardware is produced, or in that company for that case, but also obviously the software. How was the transition to kind of go into the technical engineering of software that drives the hardware? Was this kind of a complete, or maybe not completely, but a new world? But how did you get into this with, let's say, the experience of all the processes and let's say ticketing systems, the whole engineering aspect? How did you get into this? Or was this a part that you already knew, at least partly from education?
No, I'd say fake it till you make it.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, for sure. Like I said, I came from this applied background, and I guess like software concepts per se were not foreign to me from my studies, but how to work with developers and how does, as you said, like what happens when bugs are created, and like what happens, what are the processes and all of this stuff, that was just not a thing in my previous roles. So I remember kind of, I don't even know what it was. It wasn't the word, what is a build? It wasn't that, but it was something as simple as that, where somebody said something and it was like, oh yeah, you know, just blah, 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 download this build. And I was just there like, you know, like monkeys with cymbals, like clapping together in my mind, like, what the hell are you talking about? But I smiled and I just sort of had to figure it out. So yeah, at that point, fake it till you make it, 100%.
Nice. But I think this little fact I think is so, this thought of getting a chance.
Yep.
Having not everything, not, let's say, all of the skills together for a specific combination, and getting a chance.
Yep.
That is something that I kind of hold very dear in my value system. And I see it also kind of on the hiring side. When you're writing a job application, it's kind of almost like a wish list of who would you like to get. And then the person also has to fit in the team and so on. And there's never the perfect constellation. It just doesn't happen.
Yep.
And I think, especially for younger people, and we're going to get into this a little bit later, that go out, try if you can get in somewhere, right? I think this is really, really a valuable lesson that we can all take away from this. Let's say just one anecdote, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's so important, I think, as well. And I try and think of this too as I go through my career. Like, when I have the opportunity to potentially help somebody get a leg up, then I will do my best to make that happen. And I think it's hard. It's sort of, you're walking a fine line between, like, you want to obviously hire the best possible talent and the best possible people, and everybody should be a rock star because, you know, your company's survival depends on it. Versus the human aspect of things, right? Where you're just like, it's because, and I think it's important to sort of be humble and think back where you started and where you came from, right? And it wasn't always easy. And just getting that chance, in my case, just having them want somebody that was, you know, had those skills that I had and I had none of the others, was okay. And they took a chance on me there. And turns out that was absolutely the right thing, both for Leica at the time and for me. I like these little stories because I think the more you know about these stories, the more you can live life with, let's say, hope that you don't need to have sorted everything out from the beginning. You can try certain things and just move on with a lot more intuition. That's something that I'm also, the older I'm getting, is that the more I see these little nuggets of lessons that I didn't, or very often also didn't realize even that certain things happened. I had very similar experiences in my life and in my career in the past. And also kind of one aspect of the podcast is actually to share the awareness of those things. So if you are getting into one of those situations, you can actually recognize it as such.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, so and then later on you mentioned you switched jobs and you started at Esri. Now, what is Esri and what's your journey been so far?
Yes. So I've been here now in Esri for 8 years, which I didn't think, and this has nothing to do with Esri, this has just to do with me and wanting to sort of progress in my career and wanting to achieve certain things that like never expected to be here at this point in my career and say I've stayed in one place for 8 years. But yeah, again, life, right? And things change in weird and wonderful ways. And so going back to your question, so Esri, the sort of short version is Esri is a global leader in Geographic Information Systems, so GIS. That is the bread and butter of Esri as a company. And it's a big company, right? I think we're now worldwide, we're over 5,000 people, but nobody knows us unless you're in this space because it is a very niche space, yet it's something that is everywhere. So yes, I'm sure we'll get into more questions on GIS and its role that it plays in our society, in our world, everywhere we are. But yeah, so that's Esri, and just my journey here has been over the last 8 years, just consistently, working in one area and then moving on to somewhere else, and just having these opportunities within the same company is very, very cool. So I'm super happy to still be here after 8 years and to have had these opportunities instead of having to leave in order to create other opportunities for myself. Yeah.
It makes sense to most people also listening to why we have a person like you on the 3D Environment podcast because of this notion of geographic data, which is a fundamental aspect, obviously, of 3D environments and of, let's say, real-world city design and how they are stored. Probably all of us have heard of digital twins and cadastre data and digital terrains and all of that stuff. And so Esri is a world leader in these technologies and, let's say, storage and processing technologies, right? GIS, Geographic Information Systems. And now, obviously, GIS in the real world, it has a huge range of applications, from traffic routing to storing all sorts of data, right? Yep. But then also in the entertainment industry, for creating digital replicas of cities, also for, let's say, collaging different GIS data sets for the creation of 3D cities, as, for example, what was it? The Man of Steel, where certain data sets, GIS data sets, were actually mixed together, and then this completely new fictional 3D city is created. You see that how these worlds can be mixed together also in the creative processes. So now in the context of your experience of working in GIS and working with the type of data, how important would you say is GIS for you personally, but then also kind of briefly mention it for the rest of humanity? What does it mean? What does it impact?
Yeah, I mean, so if you've touched on so many things in what you've just said. So I think we are, most of us are living in, blissful ignorance of how much data is actually out there on all sorts of things. Like you said before, there's data for everything, traffic and of course, like the obvious things like flight routing and things like that. But yeah, you mentioned digital twin, it's so important, especially as we think more along the lines of, okay, so we're kind of potentially, running this planet into the ground and we need to become more resourceful and we need to, not wait. In my opinion, we've already waited too long, but we need to actually do the right things at the right time in order to make sure that we're living a sustainable life and not killing the planet, et cetera, et cetera. And data and digital twins, for lack of a better word at this point too, is so necessary in order to be able to, I guess, kind of have as close a thing as possible to a crystal ball on where you can kind of sort of be like, what's going to happen if we don't change X, Y, Z? Like, will there be sea level rise happen? Like, will that happen, or will we? I don't. There's so many different questions that can be answered, even just with traffic routing and things like that. So data for humanity is really important. Of course, being used in the right way, ethics and things is a whole different a different bucket that I won't go into now. But that's of course something that we need to be mindful of. But using the right data in the right way at the right time has a huge impact on us, on humanity, on the world. It sounds so heavy, but but it's the truth. It's how it is. Yeah. Yeah, and then obviously you have the more wonderful applications of GIS with the media and entertainment industry. I think like the idea of creating a believable city, and like coming back now to the purpose of this podcast and 3D environments, like creating a believable city if you're trying to tell a story is paramount. And if you use real data to help to tell that story, then that just makes everything much more believable. So that's why these worlds all kind of work together.
Yeah. How did you get to know the entertainment industry is coming kind of more from this geomatics engineering backdrop? Was it something that you expected, or what was your impression of being confronted with this?
So I think this is again an example of how life works in weird and wonderful ways. No, I mean when I joined Esri, so I'm in Zurich. Esri is not a Swiss-based company. The HQ is in America, but there's the R&D here in Zurich, and the R&D was formed because of a startup that was acquired by Esri back. It was 2011, and I know you're even more familiar with this story, Matt, than I am. But this startup Procedural was acquired by Esri, and the flagship of Procedural was a software called CityEngine. And CityEngine was being used in films, in TV shows, in the media and entertainment industry in general. And I came in and sort of ended up in this team, in the CityEngine team, and now being able to help to shape what's happening with CityEngine as a product manager. And for sure, this was not, I couldn't have imagined my life turning out that way, but I'm really glad it did, because for me, I've always been interested in the creative aspects of things. I've always been, I've always really been into, I guess, anything creative, like movies, music, art, like anything that brings out creativity has always been something that's been really appealing to me. But I sort of just thought that these two worlds don't mix, my tech world and my creative world. And so finding this by chance and then being introduced to the VFX world through CityEngine and through my work with CityEngine was a great turn of events that I couldn't have planned better myself if I'd tried.
That's yet another great little story, which is just super inspiring, right? Super inspiring. I want to quickly circle back to topic of kind of career in tech. You mentioned that quite early on, there was this kind of need, at least maybe back then, to have this little paper that actually proves that you finished your degree. Now, kind of in this context, what would you say is how important is education nowadays to get into the tech industries?
There's a double-edged sword of a question that you've asked there, because I feel like you hear a lot of the stories of, like this super genius kid that was coding away, and then at 13, one of the big tech companies hired them, and like you hear those stories, or you have the stories of people who didn't go to university but obviously had this portfolio of work that they were able to show, and through that then and I guess like hustling at that point too, getting work in the tech industry. And on the other hand, you have companies like tech companies that very clearly do still value education. Like I know a lot of the big tech companies, even when you go through the hiring process, it obviously starts with your background, and then, but it's all sort of still part of it. But I feel like there is a trend here that, compared to what it used to be like the emphasis on, and again, personal opinion, but the emphasis on that piece of paper is not as emphasized anymore compared to what it was like, even just going back to when I started my career, let's say. But I don't know, I don't want to sit here and say, hey, kids, don't go to school.
No, I do agree. And I mean, there's so much, let's say, free courseware available also on YouTube, for example, where I can learn so much, and or even paid online courses. There's so much information that it's just available. But then also on the other hand, kind of the stories of the college dropout that founded a company that is worth 5 billion and so on. The stories they do exist, yes.
They do.
But the statistical odds are so small. And I would say for the average person that this actually plays out, the odds are just very, very low, right? I would say.
It's sort of like, I don't know, I think also for things that require creativity, it is so hard to prove creativity in some sort of coursework curriculum, how is creativity measured? It's just, I don't know. Yes, there's certain ways that you can measure, but not in a black and white way. The same way that, I might find this piece of art amazing and you might find it complete crap, right? And so I find jobs and careers that require a lot of creativity, there's probably maybe more ways to enter into that area potentially, but it's just really hard to.
But this would then again be something that people should be aware about and consider, depending on the direction that they're going in. And it's not just in general kind of, you can do what you want, you can learn it on YouTube and that's that. Right?
Yeah.
I don't think I also would say it doesn't work like that.
No.
For certain things it can work, but you need to be mindful of your strategy, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Now, kind of staying in these topics of tech, now you're an executive board member of a kind of, you could say company, I'm not sure if it's a company, but a collection of people that called Girls in Tech.
Yes.
And so I just wanted to dig deeper a little bit. And can you give us a little bit of the insight and context and vision of this?
For sure. So Girls in Tech is a global nonprofit, was founded in the States, going back quite a few years. And the Swiss chapter, so there's chapters all around the world for Girls in Tech. The Swiss chapter was founded, I think in 2017. And myself and the current people that are in the board, we joined, I think it was 2020 or 2021. I don't remember exactly now. But it's been a couple of years. And so our mission in general for Girls in Tech, but then also for Girls in Tech, the Swiss chapter, is just to kind of, empower more women to work in the tech field, because fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, it is still a field that's heavily dominated by men. And I'm not saying that's bad by any means, but it's not diverse. And in my opinion, the best work comes when you have a diverse mix of people. And so, we're trying to empower, or at least do our bit to help to empower, in our case, women, but it requires obviously all sorts of people to what's it called? Many, what's the saying? Many hands make a village isn't the right thing, but something like that. Yeah. Okay, it's definitely, I mean,
one hears a lot about these topics in general, and there's definitely, it's a good thing, right? And it absolutely makes sense that if, let's say, looking at a problem with different eyes, kind of different cultural contexts, different points of view, different emotions, and so on, you can get more out of it because you can reflect in a more holistic way what the problem is, and because of that, the output is in general, let's say, worth more or more excellent. So I definitely see this. It's obviously a tricky topic, and for example, just being for smaller companies, being able to afford to have multiple people work on the same problem is also something that can be probably tricky to organize or get the people if they're not available. So the problem starts already earlier on in the whole education system.
Oh, for sure.
And I guess these are the topics that what are, let's say, I've seen you guys are doing, guys and gals are doing workshops, and how can people, for example, get in contact with you about these events and reach out?
Yeah, so I mean, the best way is Girls in Tech Switzerland. If you Google that, you'll get to our webpage, and there we list all the events, the past and present events on our events calendar there, so you can see what we're planning. But yeah, I think you said it correctly. Like for us, it is voluntary, it is nonprofit, it's something that we do outside of our day jobs. And so obviously your time, resources are a bit limited. And so what we are focusing on with those limited resources is workshops and just kind of opportunities for, I guess, women to speak with other women, to be put in touch with companies and things like that, to create this sort of network, this community. Yeah, and here it goes back to, again, like helping out somebody at some point, like, hopefully making a connection, connecting one person with another will help somebody in this community transition from a non-tech role to a tech role, or, build new skills to enable them to join the tech workforce in some way. Because tech, I think people think it just means software developing, but it's not, right? There's more there. There's all these other roles associated with a job in tech. Tech is such a broad term. So I think just highlighting those options and broadening horizons, that's what we're about.
I really like the notion also that you just mentioned of that we also had very earlier on in this episode of this notion of giving something back, giving experience back, and helping kind of navigating this minefield.
Right.
Minefield.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember we talked about a couple of kind of experiences you had as a woman working in tech. Some of the stories they all said, "Oh, geez, I'm glad I'm not a woman sometimes," right?
Right.
And so for that I completely get the vision, and in which direction it's going. So I'm actually not gonna ask you to talk about personal experience, because I guess we can Google all of those things.
For sure. And I think it's also not like, I think maybe there's like women might face these challenges more or have bigger hurdles potentially. But I mean, it's not just a problem that happens because we're women, or because, I don't know, for other people, because you don't fit the classic mold in that way, right? I think it also happens like for all of us. Like there's always hurdles, and there's always, adversity that you need to overcome in some way.
Yeah.
And it's about, I think, just knowing that again, it goes back to the basis of connecting to humans as humans, and not like, oh, you're my next potential hire and you're therefore a workforce, like you are a person.
Yeah.
And so, connecting on that level, I think, makes a difference.
This is also something that I've seen multiple times in, let's say, big tech, that kind of staff is staff. It's not kind of the human aspect of it. It seems very often to have been lost.
Yeah.
that's certainly one of the aspects of. I literally yesterday I had a job interview with somebody that a software developer, female software developer, that applied for a programming position in my company, and she was actually let go by a huge company during her pregnancy.
Yeah.
Right, and then it's like, Jesus
you
Christ!
can't,
It's
yeah.
a big tech. Come on, how do you want to have loyal employees if the money is not the problem, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of squeezing out this last little tiny percent of revenue of your staff, and that's
It's not okay. It's not okay.
No, it's not okay, right?
Yeah.
But then there's always also kind of two sides of the coins, right? There are also, let's say, for example, just one of the topics is, for example, sexual harassment, right, with men at the workplace. That's also a topic that does exist. So it's definitely not just going in one or the other direction. And yeah, it's important to address all of those topics and give them, let's say, a container where you can go and consciously talk about it.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to mention one little anecdote that I find very fascinating. And so I was about 2 years, I got an invitation in a newsletter to join a games conference. And I'm fully aware of kind of the equality, diversity, and those topics. They need to be addressed and so on. That's all good. But they announced a workshop where, quote unquote, everybody is welcome, except cis white males.
Oh, yeah.
And literally, and I was like, wow, that's not very inclusive of you guys, right? I get the vision, but the wording is so bad. You can do better than that. And if it's so polarizing, then it's just the politics are not, let's say, they're more coming from a frustration point of view, and they become, you could say, hateful, right? And that's never positive. And so in the vision of girls in tech, are there some specific, let's say, important aspects that you would like to spread as awareness, also using the podcast at the moment? Is there something that you would specifically like to stress, or should people just go to the website and check it out?
I mean, call to action is go to the website, check out all the stuff that we do. Everybody is welcome in what we do.
Me too?
Even you, Matt. You as a cis white male are also invited. I guess like fundamentally. So I hope that down the line, we don't need to sit here and have these discussions. This is what I envision for the future, because it's just a given. It is a given that everybody is treated equally. Everybody has the same opportunities. And I'm not just talking, of course, I'm also coming from a place of privilege in this case, right? Like I have not faced much adversity because I, grew up in certain environments that just enabled me to even have the opportunities that I have had. But other places around the world, just because of where you're born, you're just set out for either life's going to be easier or life's going to be harder on you. And so, that needs to be something that is everywhere, right? So that everybody has the same opportunities. And I know it's very utopian of me to think that way, but ultimately...
I actually think I don't think it's utopian kind of, and this is also why I mentioned this notion of, is kind of the education paper, the degree itself, is it really still necessary today? Because let's say the whole aspect of the internet, getting access to education, if you want, just on YouTube, is a huge enabler, right? As long as you have access to the internet,
which
nowadays,
many people don't, though, right?
Which still,
yes.
obviously, but that's not a technical problem. That's purely a social problem, that we cannot give access to everybody, right? That's one of those fundamental problems. It's the same thing with, we would have enough food on the planet to feed everybody, but the logistics are managed in a way to maximize profit and not maximize everything else, right? And I know a senior manager at Esri that I worked together with many years ago, he grew up in a favela, like in the absolute slum and ghetto, and he just knew that he had to work hard and keep every single dime and save it to be able to pay for an education step by step by step. And that was a huge inspiration to me to meet this guy.
Yeah, I think meeting people who really have had to fight for their seat at the table is very inspiring, right? But for everyone that is able to do that, there are many that are not able to, because again, life throws things at you, and you face these setbacks, and yes, you're becoming more resilient in general, but also it's potentially pushing you further off your path. So,
the message here, both from from you, but certainly also for me, is to help spread hope and the word of ways to consider to be able to succeed. And to be able to reach out to people like you and me, to ask questions. How can I do this? How can I do that? And to me personally, this is a huge, let's say, motivation in that sense of giving something back, because many people have helped me in the past, and kind of reaching out to people and do the same. I think I'm doing this quite consciously. At least meanwhile. And it's one of the best things I believe you can do in life in general, because this is really fulfilling.
100% with you.
Maybe I should start charging for the podcast. No, definitely not. Definitely not. Cool. But you see at Girls in Tech, you see growth. You see, I guess, more and more members joining. So the mission is it's going in a good direction.
It is. I mean, we still have a long way to go, right? But for sure, even just when we took over the chapter to where we are now, we've grown as a community. We know that we've had impact. And like I said, even if one person has helped through all of this, that's amazing, right? Because it means that what we're doing is the right thing, and we're on the right path. So I'm looking forward to much more growth and much more of this. And even if I'm no longer actively a part of it, this is just a notion that continues.
For those people, for younger people that would like to get into tech and have whatever a career is meanwhile, but would like to start a career in tech, can you share some personal tips in how to get into position, like, for example, you managing the production of the software, or just to get into tech in general? Kind of personal advice.
I mean, so one thing that I think is often dismissed are internships. Like, I know that here, we have lots of internship opportunities. They're paid pretty well as well for internships. And it gives you a foot in the door. And I mean, I'm just talking from what I can talk from here at Esri, but for sure other companies have these same opportunities as well. And that helps you to get a foot in the door. And maybe you're not interning in that specific thing that you want to do later on, right? Like maybe you're doing social media or something as an intern, but really you want to get into, I don't know, like producing films or whatever, right? But your foot is in the door, and that, I think, helps. That's one way just to get in. And I think also just the value of networking, for me at least, is, I don't know, it's like one of those things. Yeah, right. I mean, we've talked about networking a lot, you and I, Matt, right? Like, it's been, you have to put yourself out there, but it's also strenuous to put yourself out there, and also put yourself out there in the most authentic way so that you're not, but I think for younger people trying to enter into the workforce, certain events, certain things, certain places are helpful. And then I think finally, just the thing that I've been preaching this whole podcast is, you don't know what's going to happen. if you have a setback because you're not you didn't get accepted to that university or that job or whatever it is on the first go, that doesn't mean that your journey's over at that point, right?
Yeah. And also sometimes you can interpret it as maybe that was meant to be because it opens up another opportunity.
100%. I mean, I believe in that. Like if it didn't happen, then it didn't happen for a reason. If it happened for a reason. Yeah, I don't know. Not everyone believes in that, but I really do. Like, yeah, you don't know what's around the corner.
Yeah. Maybe a word on the internships. Internships in the tech industry, I think they are quite different than in certain other industries. I've had some 3D artists as freelancers for some time, and they were, for example, working in graphics design. And there the world of internships is horrible.
Yeah.
Because they are pushed basically from internship to internship. If they get paid just even a little, that's already good. But for 2-3 years, with just dangling the carrot in front of them. And I would, in that case, to those people that live in this, I would start giving them a little bit harsher conditions, or kind of the employers. Look, I've been working here for 2 years now, and without, if I'm leaving, anything grinds to a halt. So please start paying me, or I'm out of the door. I think that's a good lesson in general, also for self, or let's say for resilience.
Yeah.
But then also kind of, if I just live kind of a little bit by the advice that if something is free of charge, it's worth nothing. And so kind of if I'm doing an internship somewhere, if I'm not paid, I'm not valued.
Yeah.
So that's also something that I would kind of look out for.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I feel like a lot of the time as well in the more creative industries, you have what you just mentioned, right? More the case of where it's like, oh, but you've got the exposure, or,
Bullshit.
but you're meeting people, your network, and it's bullshit because you're being exploited, right? You're working for free and you are worth more than that. And I think, and so like self-worth, you need to know what you're worth. And as you said, like you're worth something, like it's worth being paid. Your time is worth being paid for if you're going to deliver something at the end of the day that your employer is going to use and make money off of, I guess, right? So, but unfortunately in these creative industries, 100%, like it's
the same thing in architecture. And I've seen this 20 years ago where companies were kind of quote unquote exploiting interns coming from Germany that had like a full diploma, but they had to work for a full year, or at least here in Switzerland, or kind of abroad, or in an office until they get the full degree or the title, basically. And they were working here for the salary of an intern, which is odd. But then over time, it just kind of gets accepted, and it completely also erodes the salary levels for the domain. And that's also odd, right? But it's, here's self-inflicted, right? Self-inflicted.
Yeah. And it's difficult when you're coming from a different country too, because you don't know. I mean, I had the same thing too when I moved here. I don't know what I'm worth here. It certainly didn't at that point. And also at Leica, like it was a melting pot of many different people from all over the world, because a lot of people obviously like they want to come work in Switzerland because life is pretty damn good here and we know it. You start work there and you don't know what is an appropriate salary, like where do I start? And then at least for me, over the years then, like at some point I was like, I think I'm getting underpaid. Not by Leica, this is like before all of this, right? But like, I was like, I think I'm getting underpaid here. But I thought I was getting paid enough, but I didn't know what was normal. And so, I mean, I feel like Europe is bad with salary transparency.
Yes, it is. And also, I mean, I've been in this discussion also many times, and also kind of the salary searches online are kind of bad because they're skewing the view of what salaries really should be. I mean, we're a very small company, right? There's no chance in hell for us to compete with, for example, the salaries of company X, Y, Z. I cannot say X because I think Twitter.
X is a real company
X, Y, Z,
now.
right?
Yeah.
And so even for, let's say, for a 3D artist, and right?
Yeah.
So this comparison, but in that company, they are paying me more. So, well, yeah, there's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
Either we can give you the soft factors,
Yeah.
the team, doggies to pet and things
Yeah.
like that, the kind of the perks that you cannot get in other companies. But this dialogue needs to be had, and it needs to be kind of looked at from all of the sides, right? But yeah, especially for people coming into the industry or from other countries, it's very intransparent. It definitely is.
Yeah, definitely. It's hard.
Let's switch to creativity. What is creativity to you? I'm gonna dig deeper here because you tried to phrase it before or to kind of find a definition, but
Yeah.
I'm curious.
I find it hard to define because, you know, like, I don't know. Creativity to me is doing wait, I'm going to turn this around. How are you defining it? What's creativity to you?
I see two main definitions of creativity. One is, and this is, let me also go one step back. I'm very clearly distinguishing between intelligence and knowledge. So, for example, if I've heard in past from person that people from this country are all stupid.
Okay.
And I said, that is a very stupid statement, because just because you're not educated and the education system itself is bad, there's nothing you can do that you don't have to gain the knowledge and the wiseness, right? But this is completely detached from intelligence. So now with creativity, I see multiple types of creativity. One of them is, or at least two main types. One of them is, let's say, problem solving. It's kind of also in psychological tests or kind of like online tests that you can do for performance testing. That's kind of going in the direction of inductive learning. So there's deductive and inductive learning. And there was the kind of deductive, I think, is kind of just the pure mental power that you have, the brain power. And the other one is actually to see connections. So creative problem solving in seeing certain connections that aren't obvious and think in an abstract manner. That's kind of a creative problem solving side of things. Now, creativity on the other hand is more on the, let's say, on the artsy side, is kind of being able to translate an emotion or kind of a feeling into another medium, into another medium, so you can actually translate it to other people through senses. So this could be an image or a smell or something to touch, and this has to be learned, so you can start drawing. But I think it's this translation process from feeling, from emotion to a crafted body of work.
I like that. I think, yeah, you hit the nail on the head there with like taking emotions into account here. So
Yeah.
So like my creative outlet is music for me, right? So I play piano, I sing, and I also DJ and try to produce my own tracks and stuff like that. And kind of like putting, especially when you're starting from scratch and let's say producing your own tracks or writing a song, like there's nothing there, right? But you have this sort of like urge to create something from nothing. And then obviously you want it to be heard, in my case, right? Accepted, listened to. And so for me, like, especially when I'm writing songs, like I'm often trying to think of, okay, so what is the story here? What is the emotions that is, you know, that I'm trying to convey? Or like, or I draw from my own emotions in some
Yeah.
way, right? And what that was for me and how I experienced that, and then turn this into something, right? So I like the idea of attaching it to emotions. Still hard to measure though.
But I think that art in general is, you could say, is a means of self-reflection. It's a means of processing life, same as dreaming, and kind of a little bit like coping with life. And whether you're more of an introvert type or an extrovert type, let's say somebody's more drawing in a book or singing in front of a stage, in the end, it's just a way to kind of process life and develop a sense of meaning for being alive, and for also kind of underlining that you're alive. And I think a lot of the things that we're doing in life is kind of, you could say, boils down to storytelling. And everything we're doing, or let's say we want to have a good career. Why? We discussed this in one of the earlier episodes with Mike Schaubrook, for example. Why do you want to have a, I don't know, shiny car and a nice house? Why really?
Yeah.
Well, do you want it for yourself, or do you want it to show off to other people? And kind of all of those stories, if you track them really down, all career, all family commitments, your kids, friends, everything is boiling down, including the whole job, the whole career is boiling down to social connections to other people, and how we are appreciated by other people, and how we are appreciating ourselves. And one of the most meaningful ways to channel the emotion and express it, for me personally, is creativity and art. And because of that, people that have not learned, or let's say are also, for example, too shy to express these things, I would assume that there's a certain urge, but they cannot express it. And this would, in my case, this would kind of create an inner freezing point where you don't know how to handle these things. And creativity and art is an outlet, because it lets you communicate with other people about those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, like, for a long time, at least for me, it was kind of like I mentioned it before, like I was like, I don't see how my creativity and also my tech career can, come together. But I think even if I wasn't working in, this particular area of tech, where I so happen to also have touch points with, the VFX, media entertainment industry, I think just having that aspect of yourself, this creative approach to things. I mean, you mentioned it before too, like this creative problem solving, like that applied to your daily job is so valuable, right? And so that has nothing to do with working in this field. That is just kind of you could be doing anything, but having that creative side to you and being able to access that and being able to bring that into your daily work, that is hugely advantageous.
Yeah. Now, with being the kind of in product management for CityEngine, obviously you are shaping one of the tools, are involved kind of in the shaping of multiple tools actually that can be used for the creation of 3D environments. So to you personally, what's in this line of work and in the context of creativity, what is it that inspires you, and also in extension that to the teams that you're collaborating with, in developing new technological advances, for example, in XR?
Yeah, I mean, so take XR as an example now, right? Like something that's been around for a while. People talked about it at one time or another, more or less, right? But it is definitely, and I mean, we've got it now again with AI, right? Like there's just these sort of technological topics, buzzwords. Also metaverse, that was also one that's no longer as active as a word, right? But the technologies behind it are still very much active. And so the shaping and being able to kind of think about, so in our case, like what are our customers? Of course, we're going to advance as a tech company in tech aspects, right? But like, how is this useful for our customers? Like, we don't want to bring out an XR experience just for the sake of it so that we can say, oh yeah, cool, we did it. Like, even though of course we could, but I think like for me, the value is kind of talking to customers, talking to people internally, talking to people within the industry that I work in, and trying to sort of see like, what is the need and and this is the product manager coming out here, right? Like, okay, so what is the need and what are the use cases and what can we build and how can we use tech to build something that is actually going to be useful and something that's going to be, you know, going to contribute to potentially solving some of the world's problems, right? So that's where my motivation comes from for that.
But there's this kind of circles also back to the engineering in you, right?
I guess, yes, probably. I think it circles back to many things, right? Within me, like it circles back to, again, wanting to help people. It circles back to the engineering brain of mine. It circles back to creative problem solving. Like all of it comes together in, for me at least, in product management, where I can sort of bring all of those things together and, help to shape things, technology, ways forward, all of those things, right?
What's so far in your career in 3D tech in general, what's your most proud achievement or kind of where you had a direct impact?
My personal most proud achievement? I mean, in general, I like to, of course, see, this is so cliched, right? But like see our customers succeed in using our tech and in using the software that we create in our pretty small team here in Zurich, really, and then sort of seeing the impact that it has, that makes me incredibly proud. And then I guess for me, like a personal highlight was last year where I worked with Foster and Partners, one of the leading architecture companies worldwide, and they use CityEngine, which is great in their urban design department. And I worked with them and got them up on stage for our user conference. And so just kind of being a part of that and having that come together, and then seeing the storytelling, here we are again, but like seeing the story be told of what they're actually doing and the impact that, again, so impact that our tech has in their work, and then the impact that their work has in many different ways was really cool to see. And the incredible visuals then, of course, like that's when that other side comes in too. Like it's obviously about the bigger picture of in my case here, but just seeing how awesome those visuals are. They're doing work with game engines and other things like that, right? And just seeing all of that come together was incredible. So I was, like a proud mum in the backstage and just watching that happen and knowing that I was part of that. That makes me proud.
Maybe as context for people that don't know let's say the Esri universe or the urban planning and architecture universe too much. So Foster & Partner, just as a comparison, is the architecture company that actually designed and kind of built the Apple campus in Cupertino for Apple, the kind of this super spacey donut-shaped building, right? For those that don't know, go look it up. It's incredibly impressive. But then also the projects that Foster & Partner are working on for the planning purposes where CityEngine is being used is kind of literally planning new large cities where thousands and thousands of people can live afterwards. So that's kind of the level of impact that Taisha is actually kind of involved in the management. And this has a huge impact on society, right? And then how many people were there at the Esri plenary presentation where this was presented for the first time?
I think it was upwards of 18,000 people were there last year. Yeah. So, and that was there on the day, and then there was the online audience as well, right?
Like literally in one room.
So yes, exactly. 18,000 people in a room plus online audience. So it was the Esri user conference is always, it's a very big deal for people in our industry, but also just it is a big conference. Like, yeah. And
I wanted to give a little bit of perspective, right?
I appreciate that.
I mean,
obviously I'm in my bubble now where I'm just like, Foster and Partners. Yeah. Like this is my life. But so I appreciate the context.
Yeah. No, you can, it's massive. Like kudos to everything that you're doing for this planet with your work. Right.
I mean, me being not just me, right? But
sure,
being,
it's a team, but you're
the team and all of the partners, customers, everybody who's associated with it, right? Like that's all helping to change things.
Yeah. Oh, so nice. Let's talk about some more nice things.
Yes, only nice things.
Only nice things. I mean, I like the philosophy of things, as you knew already.
Right.
So what are the fun things that you're doing outside of the office if you have some time?
Yes. Yes. Obviously, music is one of the fun things that I do outside of my work. But I also just I like being active, like being outside. I do a lot of those active sports. That's why Switzerland's so great. People are always like, why don't you go back to Australia? It's so beautiful. Yes, it is. However, I have the mountains here. I have lakes here. I have all of these things here. So I go wakeboarding. I go mountain biking. I ski. I snowboard. I kite. I don't know. What else do I do? That's it, I think. But a lot of that stuff that sort of just takes me outside and just allows me to, I don't know, feel free and do something for myself.
Nice. Now I know from some common friends that we have that in the team where you're working, every year you're going for sailing trips.
Oh yes, that's another thing, exactly.
What was the most beautiful place that you sailed? Can you decide?
It's really hard because each time that we've gone, we've had such different environments. That's the circle back to this podcast. Different environments that we've sailed in. I think maybe one of my favorites would be Sardinia. Mm-hmm. Yes. I can't really choose. We also went to Greece. That was beautiful. This year last year we were in the south of France, which was also beautiful, but much colder and, so also for people listening. So yes, sailing, and we do properly sail and a lot of us have our sailing licenses and things. No, yes, but it's also very much about the social aspect of it. So it's like, listening to music and eating good food and drinking good drinks and all of that. That's all part of it. And that, I have to say, is also very cool. Like I do this with work colleagues, right? Like I don't think that's a given. It's a given for me now, but I think in general that's not a given, and that's also a testament to the people that work here and the core values of the people that join Esri.
Oh, cool. Obviously now I also have to ask about your cat.
Obviously,
because I'm huge cat fan here.
I'm surprised and also a little disappointed that the question about the cats didn't come up sooner.
Oh,
it should be how you start the podcast.
So tell us about the cat.
So I have two cats. Even.
Oh,
There's
cats.
even two. Yes. I mean, I don't know what to say. So not so much about them. They're amazing. They're the best thing that's ever happened to me. No. I have two cats, Missy and Austin. Missy Elliott and Austin Paul was actually, if we want to be a stickler here. I've always loved animals. Like there was young Taisha who was like, I'm going to be a vet, when I grow up. Mm-hmm. So that was like a vet, and then I want to be a pilot, and I want to be this, that. So anyway, became a product manager, that linear path that you go on. I thought I was going to be a vet when I was a kid, and I just love animals. And so for me, having my cats or just animals in general just also helps me, I think, to stay balanced, stay grounded. Coming home and just seeing their little faces every day is so nice. I think some people, that's why some people have kids too, right? Like, so yeah, maybe that's the next step then. But yeah, so for me, it's at the moment my cats, and they give me a lot back.
Cats are awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And dogs.
Dogs, I still prefer cats because they are more kind of distant doing their things. And dogs depend much more on you.
You need more time if you have
Yeah,
a dog.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
for sure. That's the reason I don't have a dog.
Yeah,
Because I don't have the time.
Yeah. Oh, all right. So then I would say, let's go to the final questions.
Yes.
Now, these are the standard questions I usually ask. And I actually, shortly ago, I added a third question. Let's start with the first one.
Okay.
If you have a book to recommend everybody should read, which one is it and why?
Okay. Yep. So I don't read enough. I don't read as much as I would want to at all. But, and I think this has probably even already been mentioned in this podcast. I can't imagine that it hasn't. But Creativity Inc. The Ed Catmull story, leading Pixar, his management style and all of that.
That's worth repeating, definitely.
Yes. That was a fantastic book. Yeah, I think whether you're in this industry or not, it's worth a read.
Yeah.
Because I think also Pixar anyway has just had an impact on so many of our lives, whether we've willingly had it be so or not, right? Because we've grown up with the stories that Pixar has told. Yeah. And so, read that book. If you're going to read one book ever, like me, basically, then read that one.
Yeah, I can so relate to that. I just searched for it yesterday in the bookshelf and couldn't find it. It's probably I lent it to somebody and didn't get it back.
Didn't get it back.
Oh well.
Maybe I have your copy.
Now, if you could change one thing on this planet to make it an even better place than it already is, what would that be?
I mean, we've touched on this basically all through this podcast, but if I could change one thing, it would just be that everybody is nicer to one another. Everybody, or I don't know, everyone just a little bit more acceptance, a little bit more patience, all of that. Because I think that would just, avoid a lot of situations, a lot of bad situations. So
let's work on it.
Let's work on that. Exactly.
All right. And then the very last question.
Oh, wait, one more addition to that.
More. Yeah.
Be nicer to yourself as well.
Oh, that's a very good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of that goes hand in hand.
Yeah, that's a very, very good one.
So,
all right. And the last one, this is the one that I added, I think, last time. Who would you like to see as a guest on the 3D Environment podcast eventually? Who would you recommend?
Trying to think of, so that I don't say the sort of standard big CEO people.
Maybe someone you know.
Yes, exactly. So I'm trying to think in our little bubble. I think I've two suggestions. Our mutual buddy, Michael Frederickson from Pixar.
Ooh, yep.
Because I think he would be a fantastic guest. Because he's very funny.
Yeah.
But also he would have some good stories to tell.
Yeah. Noted.
Yes. And my friend Paolo Tamburino, he was working with Pixomondo. I think he's with Autodesk now. But he's come from that sort of virtual production aspect of things. I think that would also be an interesting topic to cover in this podcast.
Yeah. No, definitely this side of the film production, Autodesk kind of 3D tools is kind of, from what I know or from what you told me about him once, I think he's in kind of a similar position of managing 3D and kind of evangelism about the whole 3D topic. These are very nice ideas. I'll try to follow up on that.
Please do, because I would love to listen to those podcasts. Do both of them.
Yeah, the list is actually growing.
I bet.
It's incredible. I'm humbled by the people that actually say yes, and I could do so many more podcast episodes, and at the moment it's about one a month, but I could do a lot more. But
I can imagine. I think even just between the two of us, just people that would make good podcast guests the list is long.
And the beautiful thing is that 3D environments, it's not only kind of on the what most people would see is in kind of in games or in visual effects, but there's this whole engineering, the BIM world, the GIS world, the architecture world. There are so many interesting things where technologies start to flow together. The whole tendencies that I'm very interested in obviously, as you feel from the kind of the human side of things, the motivation, where do you come from? What are the challenges that you tackled? There's so much to cover.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to the future podcasts then.
All right, but it's been a huge pleasure to have you, Taisha.
Same here. Thanks so much for your time, for being here, for having me. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.